Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of MGR Unplugged. I'm here with David Gil, host of the MGR Edge podcast. And today we're going to discuss or actually talk about books. We were talking the other day about, David and I always exchange ideas on books and things that we've read that we'd like to read. And we've had a long list of our wish list of books that we plan to read and not always have time to do it. But I actually thought that it would be interesting to kind of recap a little bit the books that we've read in the last few months or years, and just go through them. The ones that we think caused more of an impact as far as giving us ideas or causing most influence as far as how we manage our time, our lives, our business, and so forth. So, but before we get into that, if this podcast was like, I don't know, recorded like 10 years ago, books are books. You think of books and you think of a typical physical book where you page through all the pages and you do dog ears and markings and post-its and all that stuff. Now we have different formats. And I myself find myself juggling between eBooks and audiobooks and physical books. And I actually like the three formats for different reasons. And I wanted to see, I'm assuming, most of our audience is the same way. They probably use all formats. But I wanted to start with that, just since we are also a tech company, so to speak. I like to see what are the pros and cons that we find with each of the formats. And I'm going to start with David first. What do you think, brother? What do you think is the best or the pros and cons of each of the formats? So why you choose to have a book in a physical format, like you can actually have it in your hands, versus an ebook or an audiobook or anything like that?
I like on all of them, honestly. I use all of them. I actually stopped doing paper books for a while. I was doing just Kindle and audiobooks. But recently I started going back to paper books because I missed it. And I don't know, there's just something a little romantic about the paper.
I know. I agree. I kind of had the same thought. I went through that kind of situation where my library here is full of books. I used to have physical books and I loved them. And then when the Kindle came around, or there were other formats, and Barnes & Noble had the Nook, I think, or something. But anyways, I went with the Kindle, and I found it so convenient. The fact that I could have my book, first of all, it was small size of the actual Kindle device. And secondly, you can load as many books as you want to and just take them with you and everything. And that was very convenient. And then again, I went to Audible, which is, all these offers that they have to listen to audiobooks. And I like the fact that with Audible, you can actually multitask. And for me, that's critical because, we listen to a lot of podcasts and radio shows and ebooks. And when I'm doing something else that is not like driving or working out or doing anything that is basically, I cannot be sitting down reading, I like to listen to an audiobook and think that I'm doing two things at the same time. But to go back to your original thought, there's something, the last month or so, I've read like 2 or 3 physical books again, where you sit down and relax and actually go through the book. And I really liked it. I really like the fact that you can read and don't feel like you have to do 2 or 3 things at the same time. I like the fact that you can actually read a book and the whole world around reading the book, which means that you're relaxing, you're sitting down somewhere, and you're actually just embedded with your book and absorbing the story, as opposed to, one thought is going through your mind with the audiobook, but then you're at the same time doing something else, or running or working out or training or driving, and then you're distracted, and before you know it, it goes to another chapter, and it's like, wait a minute, what just happened? I didn't actually pay attention to the previous chapter. So that's one of the situations that you have as a handicap, with some of the formats.
Yeah, I as far as which formats I prefer, it depends on the book. To me, I actually like, if it's something that's going to be more, I read mostly nonfiction. So if it's going to be something that's more, difficult to understand, like it's a little more of a dense book, I want to read it. I want to actually have the pages in front of me. It's just, I don't know, because then if I don't understand something, I can quickly just kind of reread it again or take notes or highlight something. With audio, that's not so easy. But with audio, I normally will do either like biographies, autobiographies, things like that, because those are almost like a podcast, kind of, and it's just kind of listening to the story of someone's life. And those, I mean, I love biographies. That's probably the genre I read most out of everything. But and I like reading them too. I'll say for biographies, I like to read on paper or listen to them. But as far as listening, yeah, it's either going to be biographies, autobiographies, or a book. A lot of times I'll kind of listen to if there's like a new type of business book written by someone who I'm a fan of, but I have a feeling that the concepts in the book are going to be something that I'm pretty familiar with already. So it's not like it's going to be a ton of learning for me. I'll just listen to the audio, and I actually will speed listen. So a lot of times,
you are cheating then.
I'll listen at
Don't tell that to the author.
Depending on the book, I'll listen at 1.5, or a lot of times I'll listen at double speeds.
Wow, you must be. I even have a hard time at regular speed sometimes, absorbing all the. I'm kind of catching up because I listen to something and then I'm kind of thinking about it, and my mind starts drifting over the idea.
Depends on the task I'm doing, because obviously I mostly listen to audiobooks, like you said, because you can do more than one thing. And it depends. Like if I'm driving, I can listen at double speed, no problem, because driving is pretty passive. It's not like I'm having to super focus, especially if you're on the freeway or something. And then just doing menial tasks, if I'm doing stuff around the house or whatever, I can just listen to an audiobook, no problem, double speed. Or like if I go for a walk, something like that. Now, yeah, if I'm doing something that I need to be a little more focused on, I'm not going to be able to listen double speed.
So let me ask you one thing before we move forward. You said something about the preference of the physical book versus the audiobook, or the Kindle is also a variation of the physical book. It's just kind of electronic or ebook. But have you ever read or consumed a book in two different formats? Like, for example, you're talking biographies. There's a couple of them that we'll probably mention later. But I read the biography of Jeff Bezos on Amazon, the Everything Store, and I also read the one from Elon Musk, Tesla. And the first time I read or listened to those audiobooks, in this case, was via Audible. And then, I mean, I really enjoyed those books a lot, especially because of the context and the content and the biographies and all that. Two people that I really admire in business. So then I decided to also buy the ebook and read the ebook. And it was like I was reading something for the first time. Like sometimes when you're listening to things, I don't know, like maybe I'm more of a visual person, so I like to kind of read the words and they kind of emboss in my brain or something. And then when I'm listening to the words, I'm assimilating the content but then what happens is, again, I start drifting away with ideas and everything, and then the book keeps narrating, and this is a normal speed, and then you miss a lot, basically. So when I actually went back and read the ebook, I realized that it was almost like it was the first time. Some of the sections were like, wow, I didn't even remember this part from the audiobook. So does that ever happen to you? Like you go for the second pass and then you discover new things?
I've only done that with one book, that I listened to it, then read it physically, because normally, I don't know, I don't reread books that often. I probably should do it more. Only if I really, really like a book will I reread it. But yeah, I've only done that with one book. It was actually a book called The Dictator's Handbook, and it's a great book. Everybody should read it. It's all about if you're interested in political hierarchies and how countries are run, really, both on the dictator side and on the democratic side. It's a great read. But anyways, it's basically about the ascension to power and how a lot of these power games work. But anyways, I listened to that book first, and then I forget why, for some reason I decided to just buy the ebook, I think, and then read it as well. And yeah, I mean, I think reading it, I picked up a little more than listening to it, just because I think when you're listening, you don't necessarily realize that sometimes you're not listening, even though it's in your ears.
When you're distracted.
But that happens to me with reading too. I mean, sometimes I'm sure everybody experiences this. You kind of read a page and you're like, oh, well, I don't know what I just read, and I have to read it again.
But the ebook has the ability to have highlights and things like that, and you also
like
see
I said,
highlights.
For things that are more dense, I definitely like ebooks. or both, but physical and ebooks. Like reading it just because I can take notes and highlights more easily. Because a lot of times when I'm listening to an audiobook, I'm doing something, so I can't just take a note or pause and do. Obviously, there's like audio clips in Audible, but I don't really use that feature very much. Maybe I should try it out. I've seen it, but yeah, I prefer highlights more than anything. And obviously, yeah, you can't take notes when you're driving or something like that. But yeah, overall, ebooks obviously for travel. I mean, some people still travel with physical books. I don't know why, honestly. I think it's more of a, I don't know, ego thing than anything.
These bookstores at the airports, and they have these bestsellers. And all that
Yeah,
stuff.
I mean, if you go and grab one book, but some people will travel with 4 or 5 books still in the day of the Kindle. I don't know. If you really love physical books that much, that's fine. But I prefer my little Kindle that I can throw in any pocket anywhere. But
right, and the thing with me, at least, is that I usually, typically, I'm reading or consuming, I guess, 3 or 4 books at the same time. And it's just like watching TV for me. I mean, you may decide to watch a show that is more of a game show or sports or a movie or something. So I don't, it depends on my mood. Sometimes I feel like I want to read a biography of some personality or something. Or sometimes I want something a little more intense or business marketing related. Some other times it's something completely different. So I usually have like 3 or 4 books, whether it's on Kindle or audio or something that I'm kind of reading at the same time. And then, with the physical books, that will be impossible. It's just consuming 4 books at the same time. It's just not
yeah, feasible. I'm trying to increase the amount of books at once because I typically do about 4 or 5, probably. Like I'll have 1 or 2 biographies and then a couple very dense type of books, and then maybe, I don't know, another something extra. But I try to do things in different fields. Like I'll have a history book and then maybe a couple business type books and then biographies. But I don't know. The Naval Ravikant was recently on Joe Rogan. I'm sure a lot of our listeners probably listened to that one as well. If you haven't, definitely check it out. But he said that he reads, I don't know if you've listened to it yet.
I haven't yet. So
he said that he typically is reading 50 or more books at a time.
Yeah. He said that somewhere else.
Is quite a bit, but he also he has a unique reading style, which we can discuss too.
Yeah.
What's your reading style? Do you always read books to completion? That's a struggle I have. I feel the need.
Yeah.
Because one of my problems is, I have a list of books on my phone that I created as a to-read list, just so, whenever I hear a book, I want to read that. Okay, write it down. Obviously, this list gets very, very long. But obviously, as I do read books, I like to just check them off. So I say, okay, I've read them.
And you cannot check them off if you haven't finished
Right, and if I haven't finished it,
it's like an unfinished task.
Because one time I did check it off, even though I only read about 2/3 of it, and then I kind of skimmed the rest because I was like, okay, I get the point of this book. But I felt so guilty checking it off because I was like, I did not read this full book.
I know.
But I do struggle with that. But a lot of times it's like, there's nothing worse than reading a book, especially one of the more dense books that you do for learning. And it's kind of like, okay, I kind of know this. Okay, I get the points. And a lot of times authors just give a ton of examples because it's like, okay, here's my...
Yeah, it's like one point explained
here's my
20
hypothesis,
different ways and 20 different chapters.
Here's my hypothesis, and then this is now 20 pages as to why. And it's like, well, if I kind of just believe you, do I need to read all the why?
No, I see those books. I think I know one of them that you're referring to. But no, I'm the same way. I'm kind of like to complete the task. And if I see it's funny because I think Audible has this progress bar too when you are reading. And it shows you the progress by like 3/4, and then when you finish, it says finished with the bar completely completed.
Yeah, the finished is a big deal for me.
And nothing kind of gets me so like I have a bunch of books that I don't even if you don't get to the very end sometimes like they have all these footnotes and all this other information.
I will skip through to the end.
It's like you don't see the finished part, and it's like I did finish this book. It's like I got it. It's like
I'll get annoyed because sometimes it'll like desync from the cloud or whatever, and then it just shows as like unread or something. And I'm like, no, where's my finished check mark? I listened to that whole book.
So yeah, when I read, one of the rules that I have, I definitely read. I'm not like on Naval's level of reading 50 books, even though I heard that he speed reads and then he skips things too and all that stuff.
He said that he does. I do it too. That he will skim through books, and then
Right.
if he finds something, then he'll start reading it.
Right.
And depending on the book, I'll do that sometimes. If I'm not sure, I'm going to, like, if I'm at a bookstore, typical thing, and I'm like, this book seems interesting, but I'm not sure if I want to actually read it. I'll just skim through kind of the major chapters and table of contents, seeing, okay, what is this? And then if it's like, okay, this seems interesting, then I'll actually read it.
But the thing is, to me, see, one of the things that I try to, this is separate from the book reading, but I try to, in life in general, separate time when I want to actually learn to relax. And when you're so intense at work and everything, and for everything you do, whether it's work or sports or hobbies or whatever, I'm 100% intense and I want to do everything 100% effort and results and everything. And sometimes I actually tell myself, I need to really learn how to relax, because I could be doing something and then I'm exhausted mentally, physically, whatever. And then I say, okay, I can't wait to have a little bit of time just to sit down and relax. But then what happens is that I sit down for like half an hour and then I'm ready to go again. And that kills me, because I really want to also be able to schedule relaxation time where I can be reading, meditating, just doing something for no reason, something that you're basically totally mentally distracted. So for me, the reading is just that. Like I don't want to skip and speed read or anything like it's a chore. Like you're school and you have a test tomorrow, you need to go through 10 chapters in one night, and then you start just highlighting things left and right. But when I'm reading a book, I want to really enjoy it. I want to find the setting where I'm comfortable and then just go through the book, whether I'm listening and relaxing and closing my eyes or going through the pages, and really put myself into the book, And if the book is not good, then I just probably don't finish the book. But if I'm reading it, I'm giving it a full effort too, and just trying to enjoy it.
I know what you're saying about that, and it depends on the book I'm reading, and it depends, like, the mood, Yeah, for me, I think that's why I like biographies so much, and I think a lot of people like biographies, because it's the type of book that you can, you can read to learn or read to enjoy and relax. And biographies are the nice middle ground where it's both, where it's like an interesting story, but you can also still learn from it. If I'm reading something like, okay, a book I recently read that had been on my list for a while was The Effective Executive by Peter Drucker. And it's a great book, has a lot of great content as far as, trying to become an effective executive and learning about that. But it is not the type of book that you read to really enjoy. It's very dry. It's very just do this, do this, do that. It's like chapter A, how to manage people. Chapter B, how to give feedback. Things like that.
Right.
And
so you're
how to optimize your employees.
You're actually reading that one, or it's an audiobook?
I actually did both for that
Okay.
one. That was another one that I listened to, but then I was kind of taking, that was one that I was trying to take notes as I was listening, but then I said, well, let me just read this because this is going to be better to read. And so I read it. But that's the type of book that, I just kind of read a lot faster through. And it took me a little bit to finish just because, it is the type of book that you have to be in the mood for. It's like, okay, this is not a book really for enjoyment. This is a book. It's more like a textbook.
That's why that's the reason why I like to have 3-4 books that I'm reading, because sometimes even if you have a half an hour, some books are not for a half an hour break. It takes you half an hour just to mentally get into that particular topic. So sometimes if it's a half an hour break that I have in between things, I may read, like you said, a chapter of autobiography of something, or maybe a chapter of something else, but not an intense book like the one you mentioned.
Yeah. And so that's the type of book that I will read to learn and just try to get through and take notes and highlight whatever. But I'm not reading to enjoy. And then obviously, to me, the ones that I enjoy most are the autobiographies and biographies. And then I'll read also, I like to read a lot of different like history and other stuff like that isn't necessarily learning. It's kind of also a mixture of just learning and enjoyment too.
So if you were to highlight a major category that you enjoy the most, business, investing, history, biographies, what would be your preference?
Biographies are number one, I think,
Okay.
because it's such a wide, you can read the biography of, first of all, people who are dead. Right now I'm reading the biography of Tesla, the inventor, and it's really good, by Margaret Cheney, I believe, is the author. I'm not finished with it yet. I'm probably about halfway through, but it's pretty good. And then, a lot of people I've read the biography of Benjamin Franklin and things like that. Those are great. And then obviously modern biographies, Phil Knight, Shoe Dog. That was one I read a few years ago.
Yeah.
That one was really good. There's tons of biography, and you can read just anybody's biographies, even ones it's on my list to read. I have not read it. There's a couple. One is called Educated. I forget the name of the author. And it's not someone who's overly successful, but it's just a autobiography of someone else. And then Hillbilly Egley? Egley. Is that how you pronounce it? Yeah. That one came out a few years ago. That's on my list too to read. And a biography can be anything.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the thing with biographies is that depending on the biography you're reading of the person, it could be also a business book. Like I just said before.
Yeah. I read mostly business entrepreneurial biographies because that's what interests me more. But like one I read that was really good was Born Standing Up, which was
I have that one. That's actually Steve Martin.
And
comedian.
Yeah, and it was funny because
obviously
obviously
here I have that one as I listened to that one as an audiobook.
It's on my phone, I think I listened to that one too. And he's both, funny and you can learn a lot from it.
You do. I mean, comedians have a very interesting, not to change the topic, but they have very interesting lives with their own struggles and everything. And Steve Martin, which is one of my favorite, all-time comedians, that's a very good book. I actually listened to it. And I actually remember specifically, it was in the summer, I think last year. Because I was working on all the stuff and I was laughing by myself in some sections. But yeah, no, that's definitely a very good one. As far as biographies, if I were to highlight the ones that I enjoy the most, you mentioned Shoe Dog, Phil Knight, founder of Nike. That's a very good one. It was actually recommended to me by you. And I think I actually borrowed your Kindle, or I read that one, so I forgot. It was definitely a Kindle.
I think I gave it to you somehow.
Yeah, you passed it on to me, and then as I mentioned before, the Ashley Vance wrote the Everything Store. It was like
that was. Did he write that one? I thought he wrote the Elon Musk one.
Ashley Vance wrote the Elon Musk. It was Brad Stone. So
Ashley Vance wrote the Elon Musk. Brad Stone wrote the
right.
Amazon.
So
the Elon Musk to me was better. I think we need a new Amazon. Honestly, Jeff Bezos biography, because I think that one was written in 2011 or 12 or something.
Yeah, I think there's actually an updated. Just to clarify, Ashley Vance wrote the Elon Musk biography.
Yeah,
that one was an approved biography, and I think there's actually an updated version. When I went actually to my Kindle, it told me download upgrade or updated version or something. I don't know exactly what was being updated. Maybe they added more data since then. But that one was very good, specifically the story. I mean, we know a little bit of Elon Musk and everything, but a lot of people know his Tesla part of the story. They don't even know PayPal, and they don't even know the way he came to the U.S. and how he, his struggles when he was a kid and all that stuff. And those guys are just totally outliers. I mean, it's just completely different how they function in life, how they think. And then the same with Jeff Bezos. I mean, he's now probably the richest man in the world, and he started with a very humble beginning as well, But Shoe Dog is a very good one too. And I also like biographies just because I'm a big auto racing enthusiast. I read biographies of former race car drivers, team owners, anything related to the world of racing. I really enjoy a lot, even though. Drivers usually when they're retired, they're only like 35, 40 years old, and really they only have half of their lives lived so far. But their racing life is very interesting, how they start. And, the business of racing is really a very cutthroat business. So it's good to see how they struggle and they adapt from a very young age to high tension and high pressure environments and all that stuff. So I enjoy those too. But definitely biographies are probably my preferred type of book if I were to choose one, and then I'll go into some business and then behavioral science too. Behavioral economics are very good. I like those two, and then obviously just any type of entertainment. But I'm also I like books. I don't like fiction books per se. Like I don't like to read novels and things like that. I'll probably hardly ever. I don't even remember what was the last time I read a novel. I just go to a movie if I need to watch anything. Like I'll never read any of the Harry Potters or things like that. I like more, books that I think are going to be growing with them.
Yeah, I'm not a big fiction person either. The last one I read was How to Get Filthy Rich in Rising Asia, which I actually enjoyed. And
I didn't finish that one. Speaking of books that I did not finish, you liked that one, and you recommended it to me. I started reading it, and I found myself forced to continue to read, and I wasn't really getting much into it. So
I like that one. I hadn't read fiction in a while, and I heard so many people recommend that book, and so I decided to give it a shot. And it's a quick read. It's not a very long book. And yeah, I did read that one, but yeah, I don't read too much fiction, just because I do like to read to learn. But as far as other genres, that's the word I'm looking for, probably history-ish books are probably the ones that I enjoy most besides biographies. And then I like science books too. It just depends on the author, because sometimes they can be very dense and difficult to get through. But if you have a good author, they can make things very easy to understand. So, yeah, I just think everybody has their own interests. I think I stopped reading as many business books just because I felt that a lot of them are very repetitive, and they're just kind of, I don't know, I don't see a ton of original ideas coming out of business books these days, and I prefer to read kind of like, the reason I like history books is just because it gives you I like reading history books that are not necessarily Western. So one book that I'm kind of getting through right now, it's a bit of a slog. It's like 800 something pages. I'm like 400 in, but it's called The Silk Roads. I'm trying to remember the name of the author. It's Peter something. Peter, I think it starts with a K. I can find it on my phone, but it's called The Silk Roads, and it's basically...
Is it an audiobook or is it a physical book?
I'm reading it. Yeah, okay. It's I have it on Kindle, I should say. I think it's Peter. It's with a K. But anyways, I'm looking on my phone as I speak right now. But what I was saying is I like Frankopan, Peter Frankopan. Anyways, but he's a really good history writer. That's also... like he explains history, but he doesn't make it boring. Obviously history, like every subject, especially the science and history, those types of things, they can be very boring if it's the wrong author. And so you have to have the right author. But I like reading history from, this is the perspective of basically the Eastern view of the world, from basically early Rome. Like, I think he starts like, I don't know, probably 600 BC through Christ and the rise of Christianity and Islam and all of these different things. And then obviously it's from the Silk Road, so it's kind of the place where East meets West, and it's very interesting. It just gives you a different perspective than, obviously I grew up in America and have a very Western view of the world, and that's the way you're taught in history class and all these things. And pretty much all of Europe is very similar. They teach you the European history. They don't really teach you the Chinese or Japanese or Eastern history, and that's stuff that I'm more interested in, especially, these days. I think it's kind of important considering the rise of China. He actually just came with a new book that I want to read. It's called The New Silk Roads, and it's much shorter. It's like 300 pages instead of 800, thank goodness. So I'll probably read that one when I'm done with this one. But it's basically, it just came out in March this year. I just saw it, and it's basically about the new Silk Roads, the rise of China and the rise of Southeastern Asia, and the convergence with the Western world. So it's kind of a sequel to this one. But yeah, I like reading those things just because it gives you more perspective on the world.
When you see books that adapt to the big screen, whether it's a fictional book like Harry Potter or this, and I haven't seen a single movie of those myself, but like others like The Firm, or it seems like more like a
Big Short. I really like The Big Short.
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
a good book, and then
do you
was really
feel
good.
like the movie adaptation in general is faithful to the book, or are you okay when they start taking all this creative freedom? And I mean, I sometimes feel like the movie really doesn't do justice to the book. I mean, they try to make it.
I don't blame the filmmakers, because it's impossible because, in books you have hundreds of pages, thousands, tens of thousands of words. In a movie, you just don't have that. You have 2 hours to tell a story. And so I'm okay. And then there's things that just don't translate to the screen, that especially when you get into like fantasy. I mean, it's easy to write about mythical, fantastical world with giant cities and all that.
Yeah, well, that's
turning that
the
onto
fictional
the
part, but
screen
the more historical type books, since you like that part, like even The Big Short, which is obviously about the recession and all that. It's like when you read the book, you really enjoy the book, and then when you watch the movie, in some cases they need to embellish the movie in such a way so it keeps people engaged, so it's entertaining. So they start even some of the war books, like biographies of troops and soldiers and Marines and everything that being in situations in Afghanistan stuff, and then they make the movie, and it's totally
there's
movie-sized.
There's documentaries,
right,
and there's movies. If you want to see the true story, you can watch a documentary, but it's not going to be as entertaining as a great movie. And so I don't mind. Yeah, they're going to dramatize things and they're going to add some flair, but that's part of making a movie. And obviously, like I said, especially with books, you just have way more time to go in detail and in depth that you just don't have in a 2-hour movie. So I'm okay. I think making movies.
I was thinking about the Green Book too.
I haven't. Is that I don't think that's a book though.
No, I know. But they were
the Green Book
is basically the Green Book. The movie they were talking
the guide.
About. Yeah, it's the guide. But it was how they were. The family was disagreeing with his screenwriters as far as how they portray the story and all that.
Yeah, that's different. Obviously, when you have two different opinions, or obviously, I don't know the whole story there. I believe the family if they say, "Hey, that's not the true story," but I don't know.
So let's get into some titles per se. Do you have any favorite authors that you follow, that you like to read all the time? Do you have any particular titles that you think are that really made a big impact on you, and that you can kind of refer to them?
Yeah, I think biographies. I think the most famous would be Walter Isaacson. He's written the Benjamin Franklin. He wrote Steve Jobs. He's written, I think, George Washington. He's written a lot of biographies. So if you're into biographies, read Walter Isaacson. He's the best, and then you can find others. As far as other books, I think he gets talked about a lot in the business world these days. But Nassim Nicholas Taleb, all of his books are great. As far as changing the way I think about things, definitely Nassim Taleb.
I just finished reading the Anti-Fragile. That's a very good book, and I've read.
I read them out of order. The first one I read was Black Swan, which he wrote after Fool by Randomness. So then I went back and read Fool by Randomness. Now I've read Anti-Fragile last year. I kind of reread it recently. And then the one I have not read is his newest one, Skin in the Game. I read that one. That's on my list.
I listened to that one. That one is good.
Yeah,
that one applies very much to
sure
business. Yeah, that one is very good. I actually read them out of order myself. I just finished, like I said, Anti-Fragile, and that was that was an ebook, and then Skin in the Game I listened to probably 3-4 months ago.
As far as books that have morphed the way I really think about almost everything in life, and really the way I see the world and just approach things, I think Taleb is probably up there close to number one, if not number one, for me, because he's just been... I think he's one of the great authors of our time, and I think that, it's always hard to guess which authors will still be remembered, say, 100 plus years from now, but I think of all the authors currently, he is up there for me.
That's good. What about more like authors like Tim Ferriss or Ryan Holiday? People that we are more in touch with. I mean, I listen to Tim Ferriss's podcast pretty much all the time. I mean, not all the podcasts, but most of them. And he came with his own. Obviously, he's the author of the 4-hour series. The Chef and Work Week and so forth. But he's also written Tools of Titans, which I think is a good book. It's a good summary of people that he's interviewed. And then Tribe of Mentors is the latest book that he's written. Are you are you a fan of those books? Do you like those, or because you listen to a podcast, maybe you don't think that you need to read the book, or do you recommend them?
I've read. I didn't read all of Tool of Titans, but I read a lot of the sections. And then Ryan Holiday. I think I read Ego is the Enemy, and what was his other one? Or he has a lot, but his other bigger one. Ego is the Enemy, and he wrote it before. It was the one that made him kind of famous. Anyways, I've read a couple books from him. Those are good. Those are more of what I consider the kind of the self-help business type books. If people are looking for my two favorite recent, or not recent, but because one of them's 20 years old, but favorite business books that are basically very businessy, even though I said I don't read as many business books these days. Ben Horowitz, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. That's probably, and a lot of people love that book, but that's probably one of the best business books I've ever read. It's fantastic. I'm probably going to go back and read it again. He just announced that he's writing another book that's going to come out this fall, and I need to pre-order it, actually, now that I think about it. But that's one of the best ones I've ever read. It's kind of a two-part book. The first part is he's kind of telling the story of his path in business, and basically back in the 90s in Silicon Valley, and then through the dot-com bubble and all his trials and tribulations. It's just really good. And then kind of the second half of the book is, okay, very, very textbook-like. Like, okay, this is what you need to do. This is how to run a company. This is how to basically win in business. And so that was a great book. And then the other one was by Andy Grove, Only the Paranoid Survive. That's also one of my favorite business books because it really talks about, I mean, what you see all the time. And it's why, not to go off on a tangent, but I think people don't understand history as much and don't understand that businesses that are thriving today, it has almost no, there's no safety, basically. I mean, because people are always worried about the big behemoth companies, and they are not always going to survive. In his book, the book came out in 96, 97, I think, around there. And he was the CEO of Intel, but, he was talking about IBM and all these companies. And if you look at IBM, they're a great example. They were kind of the Google or Amazon of their time, the big, massive behemoth that everybody thought was going to own the world. And now, if you look at what happened, yeah, they're still around. They're still a big company. They're still making money, all that. But nobody's worried about IBM anymore. They're just another large Oracle. No one's worried about those companies anymore. They got replaced. They got dethroned. And Google didn't exist yet at the time of his at the time of the writing of his book, I don't think, because it was 99, and I think the book came out in 97. I think 97. Maybe it was a little later, but around that time. And but he talks about the biggest thing is he talks about inflection points and how inevitably in any business you're not going to last much longer than 5 to 10 years doing the same thing. Things are going to change and you're going to have to adapt. And if you don't adapt, you're going to die. And that's why the book is Only the Paranoid Survive. And if you're not paranoid constantly, as they say, the famous idiom, like trying to put yourself out of business, then eventually someone else will, and you're going to fail. And he's saying the only companies that survive are the ones that consistently are able to put themselves out of business. And it's true. I mean, we see it every day. And so that's one of the best business 101 books out there. And it's just again, it's similar to the Ben Horowitz book where he kind of gives the story of him running Intel and examples of how he had to basically do a 180, not a 360.
A 360 will end up in the same spot.
A 180 at Intel when everybody was doubting him and saying, you're crazy. It ended up working, but he said, we have to go all in and focus on this. So just a lot of business lessons there. But those are the two, as far as business books, I would really recommend.
So let's wrap it up a little bit. What books do you have on your on your wish list for the next month or two to read?
Oh my gosh, too many.
I know you had a lot, but
I'm still trying to get through that history book. Like I said, that one's a bit of a slog. Finishing up the Tesla autobiography biography.
That's the Nikolai. Is that his name?
Nikolai Tesla.
Okay.
Trying to think what else. I started reading The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins. It's good. The problem is I kind of understand. It's one of those books I really understand a lot of the concepts he's talking about already, but it's such a famous book that I don't like having these big famous books that are still left on my list that it's like I feel like everybody's read except for me. So I'm trying to get through that one. Yeah, and then I'm reading one that I'm actually enjoying is Reminiscences of a Stock Operator. It's actually an autobiography of a trader in Wall Street, basically pre-Depression era, so in like the early 1900s. It's pretty interesting. It gives you a historical perspective of how things were back then. Not that I'm into trading or anything.
Fractions for the stocks, like 18 and 3/4. And
yeah,
all that.
Yeah, they would. And he's talking about the ticker tape and all this stuff. And so it's interesting, but it's more interesting from the perspective. He talks about trading, obviously, but it's more interesting from this perspective of kind of life back then. And it's definitely a good historical perspective book because it's basically America 100 years ago. And they're developing, and he talks about, the titans of his times, the J.P. Morgans, the Rockefellers, and all those guys.
Yeah, on my end, I'm just about 3/4 of the way with 12 Rules for Life now with Jordan Peterson. That one is also a very, very intense book. And for some reason, I decided to download the audiobook. And this is one of the examples where I almost have to rewind or retrack or whatever chapters because he puts so much intensity with everything he says that sometimes you're not paying attention. It's a book that you can listen to, but I'm not sure you can multitask and, in other words, listen to the book and do something else because you really need to pay attention to what he says. And it's a long book too, so I'm about 3/4 of the way. I just finished, like I said, Anti-Fragile. I'm reading also a biography. We just finished also a biography of a race car driver, Jenson Button, by the way. He just retired a couple of years ago. He used to be a driver for McLaren and many other teams. And then on my coming up next list is probably going to be Hacking Darwin, a book that I just learned about, and it's about genetic engineering also. And then I have also about 5 or 6. I wanted to read the biography of Tim Cook, Apple CEO, and it's just the list is very long. But I also this is the thing that I need to decide now, which format I want to consume the book in, depending on what it is. And if I travel, then I definitely want to put it on my Kindle because I can load as many books as I want to and read whatever I feel like. It's like flipping channels on your TV. You just choose a book on your Kindle. But sometimes I also prefer the physical book. Like I also read the physical book lately of another driver, Kimi Räikkönen, a Formula One driver. That was good. It was good, light reading. And just, again, it was a book that I enjoyed, just very lightheaded, just, quick reading. But it's good. I mean, we'll add. I want to wrap up the show.
One book I forgot to mention. I knew I was missing one. Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. He's the one who wrote Influence. I read Influence a few years ago, and it was great. It was a good book. But he has Persuasion is his other famous book, and I have yet to read it. And so that's the other one that I'm trying to get through now. And that's more of that's my typical read to learn book. That's not something that I'm reading, relaxing reading. I'm just trying to learn reading it. So that's the other book on my list, Persuasion. But a lot of people have probably read that one too.
And a side note is and you and I, David, went, I think it was last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, to a physical bookstore, which is something that we haven't done for a while. And that was a good experience. I mean, I used to go to bookstores pretty much weekly. And one of my favorite pastimes was just on a weekend or any day in the afternoon, go to my local Barnes & Noble, have a coffee, grab a book, read a few chapters, and then maybe buy it and leave the store, or read a few magazines. Now that is a little more difficult to do just because half of the stores are closed, and then we don't really have a nearby store. We need to actually make a trip just to go to one. But I kind of miss that. I miss not going to a store and being seduced by the books on the shelves. Like you look at the books and you go to the section you like and you start grabbing one and reading a little bit and you say, yeah, I'm going to take it to the coffee shop and then read it or something. And I really miss that part. And it's kind of, technology has made us shift into buying online and eBooks and other stuff. And then at the same time, we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot because I kind of miss not being able to go to a local bookstore and enjoy, the physical book or the book browsing experience. So, anyways, that's good. All the books that we mentioned, and some of the ones that we didn't mention, we'll put in the show notes for this episode. I hope you guys are also avid readers. I mean, books are great to develop your own thinking and your own personality. It's good to learn from other people's experiences. It's great entertaining, great food for the mind, and I really love reading, and I think you always come richer every time you read a book. So, anything else you'd like to say, David, to wrap it up?
No, one thing we didn't really talk about that is a whole nother discussion is just finding the time to read, which I think is really the biggest struggle. But for me, and I think most people can probably agree that to me, because I did definitely drop off in my reading, probably, last year, and then over the last 8 or 9 months or so, I've kind of picked it back up again. And for me, the biggest thing was just less time on the phone and more time reading, because that's really, if you just cut 30 minutes a day off of your phone.
It's funny you say that, because I think one of the biggest
or TV or watching Netflix, things like that.
What is taking a lot of people's time, and that's going to be the topic of another podcast for us, is social media. So it's funny when people say, I don't have time to read this and that, but then you see them like going, scrolling through Instagram, Facebook, replying stupid little comments, taking selfies, all that stuff. And that's really eaten up into our personal lives, our personal time. We spend more time taking the perfect selfie than we do actually trying to read a book. And that's kind of something that is worrying too. So, but it's funny that you say that, because that was another topic that I want to chat with you about probably next week. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for listening to another episode of MGR Unplugged. You can find all these show notes and other episodes on mgrunplugged.com and also on mgredge.com and whatever podcast network you use to listen to this.
And listen to my podcast, The Edge by MGR. You can just search MGR on any of your podcast platforms. You'll find it. Or go to mgredge.com. This week, I'll be talking about probably, I don't know when this one's going to come out. So it will be either coming soon or is already out. But it comes out on Friday. Definitely the Apple conference that happened on Monday. And then a couple other of the big news headlines that happened this week. Some of the regulation stuff that's been going on with the Google in the Department of Justice and things like that. And we'll see what else I decide to talk about. So definitely listen to that.
Well, that's it for today. And if you like this conversation, please share it. If you just share it with one friend, we'll be very happy. We need as many listeners as we can. We like to get good reviews and everything. We do this just for fun and to keep everybody entertained and share our thoughts with all of you. So you can just share it with one of your friends and give them a link or a share of any type. We'll really appreciate it.
And give us books to read if you think there's something you think we would like.
Very good. Goodbye, everybody.